Hello, and today we're going to attempt to restore this Matchbox number 33 Ford Zephyr 6 from the 1960s. The car's quite a nice casting because it's got quite a detailed radiator grille and headlights. And although it's got lost a lot of its paint, it's still in quite reasonable shape. It's got its interior and it has got its glass all in one piece. So looking underneath there you can see all the details and its casting. And on the rear of the car you can read its number plate and you can see Zephyr 6 quite clearly moulded in the casting. So it's quite a nice little Matchbox car of its time. So we shall see what we can do. Using a fairly wide drill bit, I'm just going to drill the head off the rivet. If the camera will focus on it. I'll get there eventually. There's only one rivet on this car, the other end is a sort of tongue going through where the number plate would be. So I'm just speeding it up for you. So what I'm trying to do is take as little of the rivet off as possible, so that when the base plate's put back on it should be able to snap back onto position and not rely entirely on the screw to hold it in. I'm going to fit. Okay, so the rivet's out and we can start to take the car apart. So remove the base plate. There you go, Ford Zephyr. A little bit of corrosion on the inside. Not quite sure where that's come from. There you go. And the axles are fairly straight on this as well. So next we'll take off this suspension. And this piece of plastic is always bowed. And this model was sitting very sort of tail down. So what we'll do is we'll use a hairdryer to heat it up and then straighten it out. We won't attempt to bend it whilst it's cold because it'll just snap. Now take out the interior. The interior is, well, let's be honest, quite grubby. This car's never been valeted in 50 years. But it is quite a nicely detailed interior. On this car the glass is not held in by a rivet, so it just comes out. Just held in place by the seating. And you'll notice it has Zephyr written on a piece of glass and an arrow to tell the people in the factory which way to put it on. It's a little scuffed up, but I'm going to leave this as is because it has got a couple of little cracks. Polishing won't fix that. I'm just drilling the hole for the screw that'll hold the base plate on. Making sure I just drill it centrally and not too deep, but deep enough so that the screw doesn't split the post. Now you may notice I'm doing something very silly here, and I'm stripping the paint off the model, but I haven't removed the tyres. So I'm going to discover shortly that you should remove the tyres, or at least not get a stripper on the tyres if you're going to leave them on the base plate. But rest assured the paint comes off. So after a few minutes it all bubbles up and you can just give it a gentle brush and it just sweeps it off. It's a very satisfying bait of the paint stripper to get to remove all the paint. So this is after stripping and a bit of a rub down, and you've got a nice shiny car shell, and you can see the detail of the number plate and the name badge on the boot, and a very nice characteristic curved grille of the time. I remember these cars driving around actually, although I must admit they were quite rusty when I remember them. The base plate's been given a buff up, but we're going to paint that black in a bit anyway. So now I've just given the car a light coat of grey primer. I think I might change this to being white primer eventually, but I just happen to have the grey primer, so I'm just using that for now. So I'm also going to spray the base plate with some primer, although to be honest it doesn't really need it. As a black such an effective colour covering, you don't really need to use primer. And here are the two primed pieces, sitting on the helping hands until they dry. Should only take a few minutes. Now I'm just going to mix up some light blue. So I'm just going to use Tamiya X4 and Tamiya X1 white, just to lighten it up a bit. I did take a long time doing this. I should have been a bit more adventurous with the lightening the shade, but oh well, this is like a learning process. Now I'm spraying the shell of the car, the prepared blue. I think I did this in 2 coats. Again with my Aldi compressor. I'm just making sure that the airbrush is flowing and just spraying it on gently. I think in hindsight on this I should have thinned the paint more. Okay, and so the base plate has been sprayed black, and I've put a new set of tyres on the car because the old ones melted. I'll just show you that in a moment. So basically, lesson learned is don't put paint stripper on period plastic tyres. There you go, I'll just show you these now. I'll just line the camera up for you. There you go, and that's what happens to them. So I won't tell anyone if you won't. We'll pretend that never happened. I'm still getting paint on my nails. So now just washing the car's interior with a paintbrush and just soapy water. That's all you need to do really. And you'll get all that muck out of the car quite quickly. Funnily enough, the steering wheel on this is actually the same steering wheel they use practically all the cars of this time, regardless of what they are. See, the plastic windscreens come up okay as well. It does have some scratches, but I'm not going to risk scuffing it up too much. So I think it's okay. And we'll give the suspension a clean, but we will just use a bit of heat treatment on that to get it straight again. Here I'm experimenting with polishing the car's windscreen, and I'm using Astonish floor polish, which I've just poured into the cap of the bottle and just dipped the windscreen in that. And then I'm leaving it on a tissue covered under a plastic tub to see how it dries out, what it looks like. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to use some Vallejo aluminium again, which I'll dab onto a scrap piece of plastic to use it as a palette, because if you leave the bottle open the paint will actually go off in the bottle very quickly. So we'll dab some onto the palette. And then what we'll do is we'll then paint up the silverware on the car, which will be the grille, the bumper, the headlights and the rear bumper, as the car would have been originally from the factory. So just using quite a small brush. You have to remember the size of the model is quite tiny, so this is a very small brush that I'm using. Straight away I make a silly mistake, but if you're quick you can actually rub these things off, and no one will ever know. And so what I'll do now as well is I'll just speed this bit up. Fortunately, as I've gotten older, I think I've developed a bit of a shake, so sometimes doing delicate paintwork, I sometimes make silly mistakes. So, but anyway, it's quite good fun to do, and again, it's quite absorbing. I always remember the crown work on these cars as being quite rusty. I never remember a car which had really good crown work. It always seemed to have rust on it somewhere. So I don't know if that's just because the cars, by the time I remember them, were getting on a little bit, but they weren't that old. They might have only been 10 years old, say. You see these and Vauxhall Vivas that we seem to be knocking around. Being a child of the 60s, I remember these toys being originally on sale in the local newsagents. And I remember the one at the end of my road, they used to have a whole wall of Matchbox cars, all like the boxes end on. And the next cabinet, they had Dinkies. And they had another cabinet with Corgis in. So of course, obviously, you looked at the larger models with a bit of envy, but they'd be like out of your pocket money range. So it's usually the Matchboxes that you'd have, or if you had been disciplined and saved up and not eaten your pocket money in sweets, you might have got a Dinky. But even then, they were quite expensive. At least they seemed to me at the time, anyway. Okay, we're just putting some finishing touches now on the rear bumper. So the model originally came with just the rear bumper painted. It didn't have the tail lights or the number plate or the badge painted in. But even though it's a very fine casting, I think that wouldn't work. Okay, so we have all the major components of the car and we can start to put it together. So what we'll do is I'll just put the shell of the car upside down on a piece of tissue paper so it doesn't get any dirt embedded in the paintwork. And first off, we'll put the windscreen in. Just showing you that I'm putting it in the right way around. Okay, so that's in position. And then we'll fit the interior, a nice clean interior. Properly, of course. Then we'll put our nicely straight suspension back in. The power of a hairdryer. Okay, and then we'll put the base plate on. And then we'll have to use a little bit of force to get the back plate to sort of snap into over the slightly sharp remains of the rivet that I hadn't removed. Just take a few goes. There you go. And then we'll just fit the screw. So if anyone ever wants to take this apart again in the future, if I don't lose the screw first, they'll be able to do so without wrecking the car or making it worse. Okay, and now with its new suspension, the car's actually a bit springy, where it wasn't before. And it's got that sort of satisfying bounce, which I'm sure when you were younger everyone did that with the cars. Okay, so let's see what it looks like on the turntable. Okay, so the paintwork didn't come out quite as well as I would have liked to have done so. But at least I can take the car apart easily now and do it again in the future. Also, the plastic is a bit more crazed than I thought it would have been. I think the polish actually should have showed up the defects more. But there are some cracks in it and I can't really fix that, so short of replacing the windscreen. But even so, it was like another learning experience, and hopefully I can do another one without melting the tyres again. Anyway, by all means comment and drop us a like if you like it. If not, it's fine. Okay, see you in the next one. Bye.